everyone, today we are taking a look at the Foxeer FoxWhoop 3.5. Yes, this is a 3.5-inch propeller quad, so it's a much bigger whoop, smoothie, cruisy sort of flying quad than I did the previous time, which was the Foxeer FoxWhoop 2.5. And if you remember that video, I did this. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing, but I did that 25 times. If you want to see that review, I'll put a card up here as well as a link down in the video description. The short version of that is Foxeer talks about this prop protection being unbreakable, and so I put that to the test. I tested it 25 plus at least one other crash that I didn't put the counter on in that video. So 26 crashes directly in. Some were pretty mild, some were somewhat wild. Of course, this is bigger. It's going to carry more weight, therefore it's more impact, but it's at a disadvantage now because it's gotten cold here. We do have winter setting in, and I didn't think it would be appropriate to try to do the same thing. So I want to reference those crashes when it was warmer out because as it gets cold, plastics tend to get more brittle, and I just don't think that would be fair. Although they do say it's unbreakable, they don't say anything about it being unbreakable when it's warm only, but I'll still point you back to that other video as far as the durability of this prop protection. Many have looked at that as kind of a feature that they wanted to go after and have looked at moving their other whoopy type of quads into that frame. Many questions from that video. But today we're taking a look at the FoxWhoop 3.5, so let's get down to the desk and let's get to it. So this comes in several different versions for your receiver as well as your video transmission as well as different motor KV, so you can run 4S or 6S. This is the 4S version that I have here. You can get this without a receiver, so you can put your own. You can get an FrSky RXSR. You can get an XM Plus also from FrSky. You can get a Crossfire Nano, which is quite popular. And then the one that I like the most is Express LRS. I have the Express LRS edition, and they do have new receivers, the LNA receivers. I was able to bind that up. In this particular video, I am flying my Jumper T-Lite with my Happy Modem module on it because this one I updated to version 3, which this receiver supports. Just a little detail there. This is also the Vista version, or you might call it the RunCam Link version. So it has the Foxeer camera up here. You can also get it with the HD0 analog, as well as the brand new DJI O3 air units. So maybe you want to pursue it just for that. But the price does vary, again, depending upon your version, from $289 up to $439. The all-in-one flight controller is the Foxeer 45 amp Reaper version 3. The USB port is kind of accessible, but I found with mine I had to remove this post in order to get the USB cleanly seated without giving me too much worry. You're definitely going to have to remove that post in order to activate the Vista, but you can reach the bind button without having to remove the post, but you know, you're going to have to pull it out for at least a moment. Comes with the Foxeer Datura 2105.5 3650 kV motors. Again, this is the 4S edition. This is the Foxeer Apollo, by the way, the camera. The prop is the Dow Prop Cyclone. It is the T3528. It does come with an XT60 battery connector, as well as a texturized rubberized battery mat. I believe this is a Kevlar battery strap with a metal buckle. They do not include any lights on this, but you do have antenna mounting that might be different, again, depending upon your version. This is the new Foxeer receiver. It is the Express LRS receiver, the LNA receiver. Give you a little bit of a shot of this receiver. Nice little T-mount here, molded plastic of some sort out there, and then the reverse. Whoops, that slid right off my hand, little sucker. The reverse, but I've got another receiver I want to show you that I'm even more excited about. This is the Foxeer Express LRS Lite receiver. And I've got one buried down inside here, and it's working just fine. We'll put this on the scale, but it comes with these wires already attached, so you probably need to take, what, half a gram off the scale weight when we do weigh that. On my scale, with those wires, it does weigh 0.92 grams, so I would estimate it's closer to a half a gram. And the really nice thing about this is there's almost no profile to it. Just a PVC and maybe another millimeter or two on each side. so it can fit into really tight spaces. And for good measure, the LNA receiver weighs 2¼ grams. The Foxeer FoxWhoop 3.5 weighs 265.68 grams, so we are not going to be getting under 250 grams with this particular version. In the slower cruisy flight, I flew it on this Infinity 1300 milliamp 4S battery, which brings the weight up to 424.38 grams. In the faster flight, because I always like to fly these things faster as well, I use this RDQ Series 850 milliamp 4S battery, which brings the weight to 364.3 grams. On the slow cruisy flight with the battery that I already mentioned and the GoPro 9, the naked GoPro 9 that is what I use to film, as well as the bolt that goes through the mount, it brings the quad weight up to 479.32 grams, so pretty much 480 grams. The top carbon fiber plate looks to be 5mm thick, and motor post, it looks like just about 142 millimeters. I got several bags of the Dow prop, the Cyclone T3528 T-mounted props. I don't suspect you'll get this many in a standard retail purchase, so check the product descriptions to see. I would expect at least 2 sets of props. The accessories included are antenna tubes with the end caps, so if you use the RXSR or an XM Plus, you'd use these. 2 additional mounts, one for your camera as well as one for a different style of mount for your external HD camera. I'm a micro guy, so I only have naked cameras. I do not have a full-sized with battery, full case GoPro to test this with. So we'll have to do some estimations. And last in the box is 2 sheets of stickers. Okay, this flight was actually greater than 2 weeks ago. We actually had some decent weather, and you can see the yard's relatively cleaned up. Pretty much yard cleanup has stopped at this point because what winter has set in. So what leaves haven't fallen off the trees, I suspect it'll take some time for all of them to fall off. My neighbor across the fence, maybe they'll get out one day and do their part to keep the leaves from blowing into our yard. But so it's gotten bitter cold, but this flight is actually relatively reasonable. You'll see that I'm sitting there wearing a light jacket, which is pretty typical of me. I don't tend to wear a heavy jacket unless it's really cold and I'm going to be outside for a while, like shoveling snow, stuff like that. Again, I do have that naked GoPro 9 on this quad. I am flying this on the Infinity 1300 milliamp 4S battery. It is an old battery, several years old. It hasn't seen a lot of flights. I've pretty much only used it as either a goggle battery or like goggles for HD goggles, or I've used it in flight reviews like this. So this flight on that battery is going to go on for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I do have a faster flight that we'll look at after this, which is on the smaller battery I already mentioned in the quick specs, 850 milliamp Race Day Quads 4S battery, that is going to run 3 minutes and 17 seconds. So that's kind of an estimation on your flight time. One with flying more aggressive and no GoPro, one flying slow and smooth with a GoPro, but not the GoPro battery and the full case and everything. So say if you have to add, what's the difference between a naked GoPro and a full-size GoPro? Is it 40 grams? Is it 50 grams? You know, so I would say a basic estimate would be 10% less flight time and 10% less agility in faster flight. So that should give you your basic calculation. I only mention that because I get that question a lot, but as I mentioned, I do not have a full-size GoPro with the battery and everything to test these things with. I'm a micro guy, so typically I do props that are 3-inch or smaller. I do a smattering of 3.5-inch as well as a smattering of 4-inch props as well. And I kind of flew over the yard there, showing that line of delineation between the leaf work that I'd done and my neighbor. It's not to call them out or anything. I just think that's so dramatic that it was something that I wanted to see in this footage, because I'll probably keep this footage because of that sort of stuff. You know, I've got a nice GoPro image of the difference in the yard cleanup. Lamar, our next door neighbor, he got his all done, so his doesn't look like that anymore. But our neighbors across the fence line on the other way, I don't think they're going to do theirs at all. They'll probably just wait for the winter weather to make it compost. I don't think we need to watch the entire slow cruisy flight. Let's go ahead and move on to the non-GoPro faster flight on that 850 milliamp battery. So this is much more recent because our weather took a turn and I actually waited. Kind of in general, I was waiting to fly outside for a while, and in this particular case, I got a sunny day, but it's not a warm day. It's still only about 36 degrees in this particular flight. So there was that risk that if I had a terrible hard crash that I would break it. Fortunately, that did not happen. I got in about, I probably only got about 8 flights of the faster flights in before I just couldn't bear it anymore outside. And that's actually over the course of 2 different days during the course of the last 10 days. I think that's what my records have here, that it was about a week and a half ago where I got my first series of faster flights and the weather really set in, and then I got another series, and this is from that second series. It's actually one of the last files from the DVR off the goggles. This is the goggle DVR, so this is a representation of what we see in the goggles when we're flying the Vista, the RunCam Link version of this particular quad. You don't see any on-screen OSD. You do see that in the goggles. It does record a text file, that an SRT file that has the text characters for all the stats that we typically see in the OSD, like your battery voltage, things of that nature. For those that aren't familiar with these particular kind of quads, there's no GPS in these. These are particular, beta flight. You might even call them race sort of quads. So there's no GPS hold, there's no return to home, there's no GPS at all. This is either you fly in angle mode, which is self-stabilization, or you fly in rate or acro mode, which I've kind of covered in a recent video as well. And when we do those punches, you probably see that little waggle at the top to where you're at 0 throttle and you're just you're moving away from the ground a little bit, and as it kind of settles in the sky before it starts coming down, it kind of waggles around a little bit. We saw that in the Sinbot 30, and I just released a video the other day on a fix for that. Throttle linearization, Brandon's Baked Beans, or Brandon Beans, I think, as he's known on YouTube. On Discord, he's known as Brandon's Baked Beans. I'm trying to get that right, but I'm trying to say too many S's in there. I apologize. So he made the tuning suggestion, and on the Sinbot 30, I ended up raising it to 110%, and to my eye, that took care of that little wobble. So in this particular case with this quad, when you see that little wobble, just go into Betaflight and pump up the throttle linearization. You'll see the tooltip, which is the question mark off to the right-hand side of that value area that will describe it as something that they put specifically for Whoop type quads into Betaflight to help with flight characters, flight performance, or flight issues, just like we saw there. But I always like to do these faster flights, so those of you that are buying this not for the cinematic purposes, but because you want a quad with prop protection, that you get to see how they fly if they are flowing a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressive. You're doing 0 throttle moves, not a lot of them, but some of them, mainly these kind of punches and dives. I don't find that it does the woggle or waggle nearly as much when I'm flying through the air sideways. But we've landed. Our battery is in good shape, and again, that was on an 850 milliamp 4S battery, and the flight was 3 minutes and 17 seconds. So something to be aware of, especially if you're wanting to mount an external HD camera as well as a larger battery, specifically the 6S battery, that could potentially limit the amount of camera angle that you can put back. Because oftentimes on these, they have a hump in the back, depending upon what camera you're using. So as you angle it back, you could end up running into your battery. 6S batteries, of course, are bigger. They have those 2 additional cells, so they might, depending upon how you mount it on top, you may have to mount it flat ways, because if you mount it tall, that could limit your angle. Kind of a minor issue, but it's something that I have run into, and I think I failed it to mention on other reviews like this, where we have the battery that's what I call toilet tanked, and I didn't originate that term, it's just a term that has caught my ear, it makes sense to me. So your battery sits sideways, and then you have your camera up top, and that leans back as you continue to increase your camera angle on your FPV camera as well. I think most of the time with these, we're finding, cameras, our FPV camera that is exposed. The designed flight is around slow, cruisy flight, where you might even be around other people or objects, to where you have prop protection so that you won't bump into them and cut them up. Of course, this prop protection is one that they have coined as unbreakable, which, again, I had the video where I crashed the 2.5-inch version of this repeatedly into that brick wall. At the very least, it's highly durable. And that quad was still flying. I didn't stop there because it wasn't flying anymore. That quad was just still flying. I don't have it anymore to share this video with, but I think that their prop protection here is really durable at the very least. One of the things that I would suggest for anyone is to go ahead and take a zip tie and zip tie this battery lead down to an arm. That way, if you have a battery ejection, we have a little bit of a tug there before it pulls on our pad on our all-in-one. All-in-ones are expensive, well over $100 nowadays. Pull these pads off. Oh, that hurts the pocketbook when you got to buy a new all-in-one. Really, it hurts pocketbook anytime you got to buy something, especially this time of year where you have family and friends to buy presents and you're preparing big meals and stuff like that for family and friends celebrations during the holidays. Nice thick carbon. As far as being able to flex it, if I'm able to flex it, let me get on the motors here. Sorry, I got some of that out of camera shot. Trying to get my fingers in a decent leverage position. Yeah, I can make it flex just a touch. Can I show it there? So my hands aren't exactly weak, but it's taken a pretty good amount of force in order to get any flex out of this. It's 5 millimeters thick. I actually saw a video, I think, of this one, and somebody was standing on it. We've got these metal posts that will run all the way through to the ground here. I do think that's something that you want to be careful with in landing, not just this one, but others as well. You want to be on a pretty flat surface, so if you're out in the mountains and you're going to get a scenic shot, you might need to have a backpack or something that's got a flat backside to it so you can take off. We do have these nubbins on the bottom side of the frame to help keep off our screws. But again, if it's not real flat, that's not going to help too much. And we've got downward facing props, so you don't want stuff getting in there, although that's a pretty robust all-in-one. We've got pretty big motors. I don't think we'll burn it, but you don't want to damage your props on takeoff because you got a rocket nicked up and then you end up with vibration sort of messed up footage, because that's the primary design of this, is to get your nice cinematic shot. This was more well secured, but as I got to binding it and fussing with it, you can see I've pulled it out a little bit. You can see they've got some glue on there, so that should be down. That was when I got it down in there. But if you get the Express LRS edition, you're going to have to pull this out just like I did in order to be able to get it bound up. You've got to I was using the button on here in order to do the binding procedure on here. I didn't flash that with my binding phrase, so that's one way you could avoid pulling this receiver out. But if you get one of the other receivers that have buttons on them, then you're back in the situation where you have to pull this out and then squish it back down in there. So it's got a little home here in the 3D printed mount. And then they've got their T-style mount here. And then we've got those antenna tubes that I showed you earlier right here. And this is all relatively flexible. I was a little bit surprised by that, especially with this long old antenna, which it's long, so it helps get the antenna above your battery. So whether you're flying to yourself or away from yourself, you should get, I don't want to say the best reception. It's better to have this up above the battery than it is below it, is the gist of what I'm saying. So what they've done here will help you get better video from further away. They have gone ahead and zip tied the motor wires down to the prop protection part. I want to say whoops, but that's not technically whoop. It's just prop protection. You might call it ducks. You might not call it ducks. So we have the motor wires secured down. That's a good thing. Got to do something. You got downward facing motors, and then your motor wires have to route in here, and you certainly don't want them falling down into your prop, because that was be bad. So one of the things when I just look at this that I think about the durability, obviously the camera is out here in front. There's not much we can do about that. None of these are really designed with camera protection unless the camera is down lower and kind of seated within a cage like we saw in the Sinbot 30. But this mount was something that I thought about whether it was durable or not. And of course I crashed that other one 26 times and this mount never broke. But of course I wasn't going in head first. I was swinging around to the side to try to protect this. So I think as far as shock absorption or being able to handle a dramatic crash that's not direct to it, this should be fine. But of course, if you've got a camera mounted up there, that might not be. I think the biggest downside of this design is that you have to remove this post in order to get at your USB ports, which you're not going to need access to. But it's 2 screws. It comes right in and out of there. I didn't have to remove any other screws to get that post out. You know, it doesn't have like a holster down in there to where you have to get this bottom prop protection way down away from the carbon fiber in order to get it out. Take out the screws on both ends, and then you just kind of angle and move it out with your fingers, and then you do the same thing to put it back. I just took a little tool and stuck it down inside there to kind of just wiggle the motor wires out of the way so I could get access to the USB-C port for the Vista or link activation that we have to do through the DJI software. At the time of this recording, I do not see where Foxeer has got any sort of seasonal promotion going on for the FoxWhoop 3.5, but you might want to check around. Of course, at other retailers, you never know what the price is going to be. I'll put links to whoever is carrying this down in the video description if you want to take a look at those shops, see what prices they have. Maybe they're offering deals. I know that Pyrodrone lowered their prices on a number of things. Race Day Quads, Get FPV. So here in the U.S., we've seen a number of our favorite RC and FPV shops that have lowered prices or special deals out there. It's that time of year, so whether you're out shopping or not for drone stuff, make sure you can feed yourself and you've got your home and your safety, your health and your well-being all taken care of before we spend any money. Make sure any special people you have in your life, they're taken care of as well. But if you've got some extra funds and this is your time of year that you like to stock up on your drone stuff so you're all set for spring when it hits, or maybe it is your spring now, sure, go down in the video description, take a look at the shops that are carrying this particular one, or at least I can find listings for it. And if it's something you're interested, click them and see what they got for price. Maybe it'll save you $100. I don't know. That seems like a big number. But if it's a $450 quad, I wouldn't be surprised if you can save $50 or $75 on it. Me, I like the smaller one. But I'm a micro guy, and I don't fly the full-size, big, heavy cameras. So if you want one that can carry a GoPro 9, 10, 11, that's the full-size, a 3.5-inch prop is going to do that more effective than a 2.5-inch prop. That's just how it goes. It's going to do it longer, and it's going to do it more effective. So that's kind of your differentiator there between this version and the smaller version. Another one would be the size of batteries that you might have. If you have big 1,500 milliamp batteries that are 4S or 6S, 3.5 is going to be better than 2.5. So, a couple things to chew on there while you're pondering whether this one's for you or not. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or just something you want to say otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.